I'm Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Scott Wiley, President and CEO of the Ohio Society of CPAs. Scott provides the executive vision for one of the nation's top accounting associations. He leads a team of professionals that create and deliver innovative advocacy, education, business solutions for 85,000 CPAs and accounting professionals working in businesses of every size and sector across Ohio. Some of the awards that Scott has received is immediate past chair of the American Society of Association Executives. He's been the chair of the board and also the chair of the ASAE Foundation. He also, with the American Institute of CPAs, has been part of the State Policy Priorities Task Force, National Commission on Diversity and Inclusion, and the Future of Learning Task Force. He's a member of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Corporate Leadership Advisory Board, the Fisher College of Business Advisory Board, the Ohio State University, and Leadership Columbus class of 2017. During my interview with Scott, we talk about his CEO story, beginning with his first CEO role in his early 20s, what he learned then that still helps him to this day. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm here with Scott Wiley, President and CEO of the Ohio Society of CPAs. Scott, do you want to give a brief background on yourself before we get started?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Amy. Like Amy said, Scott Wiley, and I have the distinct pleasure and honor of serving as the CEO of the Ohio Society of CPAs. We're the second largest state CPA organization in the country, with more than 28,000 members in all areas of practice, as well as more than 10,000 high school and college students we engage with each year. And really what we do at the Ohio Society, and what I have the privilege of doing as CEO, is we bring the profession together. We connect to talk about where's the profession going, what's the future of the profession, and how can we help shape it. For the last 20 years, I've had the privilege of leading organizations that are focused on how do we advance the future and how do we bring people together who really are focused on building trust and relationships. And that's what excites me about this work. And Amy, that's what excites me for our conversation today.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. And I've known Scott for a while now, and I'm also on the board for the Ohio Society and really has seen his leadership capability and his way of running an organization. So this is such a great conversation to be able to have, because what we're going to do is dive a little bit deeper into who Scott is. So maybe you can start back. Where did you grow up and what did your parents do? That sort of thing.
So I grew up in upstate New York. I actually just got back from there last night. I was there visiting my mom. But I grew up in a small town called Stillwater, New York. Probably the closest city is Saratoga or Albany, but Stillwater's claim to fame, if there was one, is that's where the Battle of Saratoga happened and where Benedict Arnold turned. I actually grew up a mile from the turning point of the American Revolution. And in so many ways, that's really shaped who I am and my outlook on life, as well as my outlook on leadership. Spent the better part of my years, in New York. My parents divorced when I was young. I have an older sister. And really, the two of us stuck together. And she is still probably one of the people I look up to the most, because no matter what was going on in my life, I could always count on my older sister, Michelle. And I went to college at the State University of New York in Oswego, New York. And for anyone who's ever heard of that, Oswego is literally on Lake Ontario. So my freshman year in college, there was 275 inches of snow, but that snow came between Halloween and Easter. And there was the gusts, and so that also helped inform who I am. And When I was in college, I joined a fraternity. I was the student body president. I've always been drawn to leadership, but also really helping people find the best version of themselves, whether that's been in recruiting other people to join an organization, whether that's been in how can we help organizations serve the people that need it the most, or whether that's been staking out a position that sometimes isn't popular, but really is about where we need to get to. And those things have really helped inform who I am as a professional. After college, I moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, and actually went to work for my college fraternity. And my first assignment out of college was going to be to travel the country working with collegiate chapters and undergraduates and teaching them about recruitment. And, in that time, I really got to learn a lot about sales, marketing, but also how do you communicate with others and what really builds relationships and, the value, if you will, of the handshake and, the importance of not just the large group meeting, but the one-on-one interactions where you can really get to know people and what drives them and motivates them, but also who they are deep inside and how you find those connections. And, Amy, as I think about the work of this profession that I'm so grateful to be able to work with today, relationships are really what our business is. When we think about the role of CPAs, and, I know you know this, but anytime I get an opportunity, I'm quick to tell a firm, to tell CPAs, to people who work in industry, the value you bring to your clients and those who count on you isn't your ability to decipher information. That's valuable. But the real value is your ability to build relationships grounded in trust. Because from that trust and that relationship, you can do so much more. And, so I did that job for a couple of years. And one of my mentors was my boss, who was the CEO of the organization. And he left to start his own business. And they brought in an interim leader for a period of time, and they did a search, and the search failed for the next CEO. And that interim decided that he wanted to go back to running his own business. But he recommended to the board that as they started the next search, he'd hang around for a couple days a month, but that Scott and another person in the organization, let's elevate them to really, my deputy roles, and they can really help me run this while you finish the search. And that went on for a few months, and I got to present some information at a board meeting. And the chair of the search committee was in the room, and he came up to me in the hall and afterwards said, hey, you should really think about applying for this job. And I was 24 years old at the time. And I just thought, well, what a nice thing for him to say to pump up my ego as we go into this next phase. And I guess I really kind of treated it that way and kind of blew it off. And a couple of days later, I was on the road traveling and I thought about it. And I called Tony, who was the interim, and said, hey, they brought this up to me and I really didn't pay any attention to it. And he said, I'm aware. I'm like, oh gosh. He's like, are you interested? And I said, well, the more I thought about it, I'm like, yeah. I said, but I'm 24. There's no way. He's like, you should call them now and tell them. And so that was on a Wednesday. And I called that afternoon and he said, we're closing the search Friday at noon. Can you get me your resume? And, 24, there wasn't much of a resume to share. But I did so. And one thing led to another. And, I made it to the final round and I went in thinking, there's no way I'm going to get this, but what do I have to lose? So I went in with a plan and told them what I thought and where I thought we really needed to focus. And, lo and behold, 2 days later, they called and said, we want you. And I'll never forget my first day on the job as the CEO of the fraternity. All the pictures of my predecessors were on the wall. And the organization was just over 100 years. And there was 9 people who'd held the role before me. And, some held it for decades and they did it while they were a part-time lawyer and things like that. And there was one guy whose picture was on the wall and he lasted 6 months. And I remember thinking to myself, if I could just beat him. I was the CEO for 10 years. I held the position longer than anyone who had the title of CEO other than a person who did it as a volunteer. And the organization grew 300% in my time. We grew the budget, by more than $5 million. We expanded across the country, and we brought more leadership programs to college students. We did 2 major capital campaigns where we raised more than $20 million. I got to work with the best people in the world. I got to work with college students, which was never dull. Sometimes I wish it was a little more dull.
Yeah.
I like the joke now that with CPAs, I really like when they say risk management, but with college students, I would just like cringe on a Monday morning.
Yeah, what that means. Yeah. Yeah.
But I did that till I was 34.
Well, before you go further, I'd like to kind of go backward a bit, all the way back to your sister, because you really kind of pinpointed her importance to you. So would like to learn just a little bit more about her and just your relationship.
Yeah, Michelle and I couldn't be more different. To this day, I'm 43. She's just turned 48. I like to make sure she knows that she's 4.5 years older, that she's still 5 years older,
right?
For a few more months. She would still kick my butt to this day. If she thought I was doing something I wasn't supposed to, or I was selling myself short. And Michelle is the type of person who everyone respects and wants to be around. And that's because she doesn't treat anyone differently. Mm-hmm. And I so respect that about her, and have tried my best to emulate those skills and talents that she has in that regard. But she's also someone who's much more comfortable being behind the scenes and being the cheerleader. And that's where she and I are different. Whereas I like to be out front and be the cheerleader, but also share the stage, so to speak. And just growing up as kids, where we lived with our mom, we would see our dad, infrequently, but we always knew we could count on each other. Mm-hmm. And when she went away to college, she stayed close to home, and it was never spoken, but I know it was part because she knew she wanted to be there for me. Mm-hmm. And I was so grateful for that. And then when I got to go to college, I went hours away, but we always stayed close. And she still lives back home, and we talk 3 or 4 times a week, even if it's just for 5 minutes to talk about what our mom's doing, or to compare notes about our kids, or just some stupid thing we saw a friend doing on Facebook.
That's so nice. Yeah. So
I consider one of my closest counsel.
That's and not everyone's fortunate enough. We all have different family dynamics and who's involved and so forth. But when siblings can make it through those family dynamics together as friends, it's a nice thing.
Yeah, it's and she's not bashful about telling me when I'm wrong and and what I should go do about that. Yeah, and sometimes I don't like to hear that, but I know it's always coming from the position of love.
Right. So, and then what did your mom do?
So my sister and I were the first generation in our family to go to college. My mom worked for the state of New York for over 40 years. Mm-hmm. Took some time off when I was a kid, but she retired from the New York State Department of Health, and she actually worked in an area that helped regulate assisted living and nursing facilities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my dad, he actually drove tractor trailer. He hauled fuel oil all across the state. And so, he worked, late hours, early in the morning. And so when he wasn't traveling, he'd be sleeping a lot of the time when we were awake. So weekends was when we got to spend a good bit of time with my dad. Mm-hmm. And my dad passed 10 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. But yeah. And so with your mom, kind of sounding like that she was the main responsible person. So what did you learn from her watching her try to manage it all and balance it?
Yeah, I say with pride and great truth that I was raised by 2 strong women. Mm-hmm. My mom and my sister. Now, who's stronger? Let's not get me in trouble, and I won't answer that one. But, my mom worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, to make sure we had everything we needed, and probably more than we needed, and most of what we wanted. And mm-hmm. So, as a young kid, I didn't really understand or respect that, just knew that she was always working. But as I became, a teenager, and even in college, and certainly beyond, I saw it, and I saw, how hard she was working, how tired she was. and I respect it. And I'd like to think that I get my work ethic from her. And certainly, I think just the forms of decency and respect, holding the door and saying please and thank you, things that I grew up knowing as manners, and that was just what it was.
Right.
But then even, smaller things. My mom always was, it mattered to her, when I was involved in sports or clubs and organizations, and, I would have a lead role, and, it was important that, well, you have to know how to iron your shirt and iron your pants, and that's how you use starch, and these are the colors that match, and, so I will still joke with my mom. I'm sure, hopefully there's none of your listeners that will be offended by this, but my mom, Jody, taught me that you never, ever wear black shoes in a navy suit.
Okay.
And I don't care what style guide comes out that says that's okay, but we'll still talk from time to time. I'm like, Mom, I was in the airport and this guy was wearing black shoes and a navy suit. And she's like, no. And so, we still bond over that kind of stuff. And, I have a almost 15-year-old daughter who is kind of the fashionista in the house. And, my mom will talk to her and she's like, now make sure your father's tie matches the shirt and the jacket he's wearing, because, I can't be there and who knows what he'll pick out. But, so I still, and, I say that jokingly, but I so appreciate that.
Right.
Because,
it's the little thing.
Yeah. It's looking the part is part of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
But yeah, but my mom is a huge influence on my life.
So, coming from parents that didn't go to college, what drove you to go to college, and what did you imagine you were going to be?
I thought I was going to be a politician.
Okay.
And
why?
Because I was student body president in high school. I was student body president in college. I was president of my fraternity in college. I really enjoy what I thought politics were at that point in time. And the whole, the running, the leading, the charting a vision, and, rallying people around an idea and leading people to that. As I've matured and have a family of my own, I realize I enjoy service. And I will differentiate that from politics. And I think there are many people who are in public life, who serve in politics today, that truly are about service. And I respect them. And, regardless of if their beliefs are equal to mine, I am so grateful for their willingness to put their name forward and to lead and to serve. And then I think what I observe today all too often is becoming more common is politics has become blood sport. And that's not something I enjoy or look forward to. But I found that leading people and leading organizations isn't really politics. In many ways, leadership is an element of business. It's an element of communication. And so I graduated with a degree in communication and a minor in business. And
so how did you go through school? Like, if your family, was working class, how did you afford it?
I worked in college and I had loans, and, no one will ever tell you, including me, that I was the best student in college. for the CPAs tuning in who might wonder, how the heck did the Ohio Society hire this guy? I can tell you it was not because they talked to Dr. Florence Kirk, the only accounting professor I ever had, who certainly I was not memorable to her. But, I remember working in the dining hall. I remember working in the student union as a building manager. And then certainly, when I got into positions of leadership, that created other opportunities. But, I think about the jobs I had as a high school kid and college that best prepared me for the roles I'm in today. It was when I got to be a server. Because, one, carrying all the plates on the arm, I can still do that most days. I
used to have dreams because where you had to go underneath, and then the tray would slide backward.
I can still do 3, depending on the size, maybe 4 plates on an arm. But there's an element of juggling, and you got to have multiple things. You got to have balance, I'm sure there. but also how you engage with people at the table who, quite frankly, I'm here with an armful and they're not ready to be plated yet because they're in their conversation. And so how you read the nonverbals and how you engage with people, and when someone doesn't get something they wanted, and how you put the best face forward to make sure that they still can get that. And when you work in a place where I got to work in the restaurant in the faculty club where a lot of administrators and faculty came, and you saw the regular people, so you can build a rapport. About what their interests are, about their kids or what their research is in, and demonstrating that that and you care and you can remember it. Or I think certainly I wasn't an idiot, helped you get the better tip.
Right.
But it also demonstrates that, you care and you are about relationships. And I think so much of what we see and talk about in our profession today is grounded in those relationships. And certainly we're at a time where trust has become the most valued element of relationship building. And I just learned that, that wasn't something I learned in a class in college, or someone told me I had to develop this skill in a job. I think, I learned that through my own upbringing, through my own surroundings, but I also saw that how doing that could really open doors and create new opportunities.
So when you became a CEO at 24, how did that go? I mean, obviously you got good results by the end, but starting out, how did you have the confidence? Where did you mess up?
I messed up a lot. I've learned to be a CEO. That's part of the job. And if you stop messing up, then you get complacent and no one wants, it's time to go. I'll be the first person to say that.
Yeah.
But, early on, the bar was low. The bar was low because, gosh, who did they hire? What was the situation? The organization was in stress. So, that probably served me well. I also, at 24, I didn't have, I was dating someone who's now my wife, but, there was nothing tying me down. So I traveled all the time to meet with people, to be in front of people. So I quickly became the face of the organization. But in doing that, here goes, I was building relationships and building trust and getting people to buy into me and getting people to buy into the ideas and the vision and what the future was going to look like that I was sharing. Because, well, Scott, I don't know if I agree with everything, but, I trust you. You're a decent guy. You're being honest. You're generally humble. So I'm going to give you a little bit of latitude here to see what you do with it. And then became a little bit more and a little bit more. That also allowed me to meet people and to build more relationships. And as a result, I got to meet some really successful alumni in our organization, people who were executives. One who's still one of my mentors today is actually on the U.S. and global board of PwC, a CPA. And, I've counted on them to not only they were the board of the organization, literally, but, they were my advisory board. That's who I kicked the tires with. That's who I'd ask ideas, or that's who I'd count on to give me it straight that, hey, you're doing this great, but you might got to work on this. I was an ummer early on. So public speaking I enjoy now, but I was an when I would speak. And so it took some working through and, that coaching to get through that. But at 24, I was raw and unpolished, but I had a blast.
Yeah.
And I still like to think that, at 43, I've got the energy and the vigor and the vitality. I'd like to think I'm a little more seasoned, but there was something about being raw and, and willing to jump in the deep end of the pool and say, I'm here to learn, let's go.
Right.
And I still try to bring that every day to what I do. And, as long as there can be that element and still make the impact and get the results, because to me, that's the part that's fun. And when the work starts being fun, I think it'll probably show. And that's when it would be time for someone else to get this great opportunity.
Right. So you kind of brought into what you do, politics and service, right?
Yeah.
Because you deal with a lot of politics as part. I don't think people might realize how much the state societies are involved in government affairs. So how has that passion for that served you in this role?
It's been a nice marriage, I think, because I'm personally interested and passionate about, that, public policy sausage making, if you will, of, how a bill becomes a law and all the stuff that goes on, the glad handling behind it. Even if at times it's like, I can understand why no one wants to be a part of this because it is messy. Right. But also recognizing, there are really good people out there. We have too few CPA legislators, and we're trying to recruit more. But there are really good people out there who care and want to do good. And, the reason that state CPA organizations are so involved is because those people who care and want to do good, they know they don't have all the information. And this profession specifically is viewed as an unbiased and fair arbiter of information and knowledge. We work with the largest, most global public companies in the world. We work with the smallest startups, in the state, in the city, in the region, and everything in between. So our people are trusted business advisors to those companies, those businesses, and understand how tax policy, regulation is going to impact them in their work and their workers and their ability to grow and buy more equipment and invest in capital, hire more people. And so policymakers care about, well, I want to bring more jobs to my district, and I want more business to grow, and I want us to have a favorable tax climate, and I need to know how business is going to think about this, but who can I talk to? Well, enter the Ohio Society of CPAs, and in other states, those organizations, and CPAs can come in and bring that unbiased view. Now, we also have some thoughts beyond the unbiased view of you really should do this, and because of here we go again, the relationship and the trust. The conversation ultimately ends with, well, you've given me three options. Which one do you think we should do? But because we gave them three options, they're more likely to ask that. So it is a big role. I think it's getting harder because, we're in a period of time, regardless of what party affiliation you might have or your politics are, et cetera, where trust is really deteriorating in institutions, government, other, across the board, even outside of the political realm. And so I really see this as an opportunity for CPAs and the organizations who serve them and represent their voice to really invest in it's the values of the profession, integrity, confidence, competence, protecting the public interest. How we elevate those things can not only help rebuild trust, but can demonstrate where trust can be the bridge to bring people together on issues that need not be political.
Right.
How we're going to solve an issue regarding unemployment compensation or the creation of the PPP. This profession was integral in that.
Right.
This profession was integral in not just bringing businesses back, but finding their way forward. So, it's a great opportunity that this profession has provided me and others in roles like mine to be able to do that. But I also think it's helped elevate this profession these last 15 months in new and profound ways, that the role of CPAs as America's most trusted business advisors has never been as recognizable as it is today.
Yeah. And, as you're talking, I was thinking too, I think it's important to surface this kind of work because, so many people go into the profession thinking, tax or audit. They don't realize how many different avenues there are where right now, really anywhere I speak, people are burned out, but especially accountants for what they've been through. And there's, this, kind of bubbling point right now where everybody's like, should I stay? What should I do? And, I've just had this message of just pause and observe what the opportunities are. And it doesn't necessarily mean if you have expertise in tax that you couldn't go into government, volunteer with the committees at your state society, start learning about what that work is, because there is other types of things that you can use your knowledge that people don't even realize are out there as opportunities as CPAs.
I think we're at this interesting point where, let me state probably the obvious, or what people are tired of hearing, as we see the boomer exodus intensifying, and because good for them, they've earned the right to now go enjoy whatever their version of next is. And for many, it's working in a different way. And some it's now beach and margarita in hand. And
right.
Hey, they've won for me. But we need to do a knowledge capture with that group, because we need them still. This economy needs them still. Mm-hmm. They've got a lot of longevity, or living longer still. So we need that. But then I think about the profession that's already here, the X and Y's and the Z's, and even what's coming beyond that, and the clear recognition that audit, tax, advisory, et cetera, all those things are true, but we need to start talking about this profession in a way that I know you're personally passionate about, Amy. This is an accounting and tech profession. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those two things are married in a way where we know we've got significant pipeline issues, and we're working to address those. But we're not going to address the pipeline issues with replacement of people in a one-by-one way. Right. That's a known fact. Mm-hmm. The birth rate of the country isn't going to get us there. So everyone can get that out of their head right now. But accounting and tech is going to create even greater opportunity for us to elevate our services, advance and accelerate our ability to build relationships and trust, because technology is going to become a tool and a resource to better position us and empower us. It's not going to be something we're captured underneath, where I know some people have that glass half empty, not me, but approach. But I think it's this idea that as we marry those two, and we really get our arms around and our fingers in it and see how that's going to work for us. And I think the pandemic has created some opportunities for that. Has it been perfect and seamless? No. But for those who've made those investments and continue to, I see the numbers. Their double-digit profit, their double-digit growth, their newest acquisitions. Those, even at that smaller practitioner level, where they're partnering with others to create that opportunity. This profession those opportunities are there. Mm-hmm. And I think that balance is becoming more recognizable.
So we kind of skipped over how you ended up in the CPA world.
Yeah.
So you were at, the CEO of this college fraternity. So how did you end up in the accounting profession?
I'd been in that role for 10 years. And in that 10 years, I married my wife, Linda, and we had 2 kids. Caroline, who's almost 15, will be a first year high school, Frosh, this fall. And then Chase, who is almost 13, will be a 7th grader this September. But, around that time, it was 2012, I think, the kids were at an age where my wife had defended her dissertation, and she was a senior administrator at a university, and I was traveling nights, weekends, and we needed a change of pace. We wanted a change of pace. And I was also coming to the point where, hey, these last 10 years have been great, but I think I know it's time to say when, and I certainly wanted to figure that out before anyone figured that out for me.
Right.
So a recruiter called, and we got to know each other, and he called me a couple months later, said, hey, I'm doing this search for the Ohio Society of CPAs. Clark Price is retiring. And I'd known Clark because in my world, Clark was an icon. And he's like, I wondered if you knew of anyone who might be interested. If my wife were here, she would tell everyone, he misses the most obvious cues.
This is the second time.
Yeah,
actually.
So
the first time you didn't get it.
Yeah, so being the diligent, hey, a recruiter calls, you always want to make sure you respond, build a relationship. You never know when you need it. His name was Jim. I sent Jim 3 names, and none of them were my own. And Jim responded via email, thanks, I really appreciate this. I will follow up with them. But what I was asking is if you, in all capital letters, anyone who might be interested. I'm like, oh, let me read this again. And I'm like, well, yeah, this sounds like something great. So we talked, and one thing led to another, and I got invited to meet with the search committee. And I like to joke that the board, in their infinite wisdom, because Clark had been the CEO for 23 years, so they hadn't been through a search in so long, I'm sure it was hard to figure out who should be on the committee. So they didn't decide that. They just let everyone on the committee. There was a 17-person search committee.
Oh my goodness.
I'll never forget when I first showed up to meet the search committee. It was in a presidential suite of a hotel. And literally, it had to be in that room because that's the only way they could fit everyone. And I remember thinking I had 90 minutes to meet with them on the first interview. Not everyone asked questions. And I remember driving, going back to the airport in the car thinking, well, that didn't go well because some people didn't even talk.
Right.
And I can now realize, 90 minutes, 17 people, there weren't time for everyone to ask questions. And they had already planned who was going to do what, but I didn't know that.
Right.
And so I got invited back to the final round and, had to present, and we got to have a meal. And I still joke with some of the people. I got invited to lunch. And I think the idea was we want to see if we can actually like this person when they're not on the job.
Right.
Well, remembering what my mother had taught me, I was wearing a navy suit, bright red tie, and I had a white shirt on. Well, they decided to take me to lunch to an Italian restaurant. And they had pre-ordered the food. It was family style. And sure enough, I remember sitting at there was 3 tables. I was going to spend 30 minutes with each group. And the first table, they had bruschetta. I'm like, no, tomato, Thai,
right.
Oil, not doing it. I get to the second table, and there's salad and pasta. I'm like, you guys are killing me here. So I just did my part to talk. And by the time I got to the third table, I think they had wised up. They're like, we really want to let you eat. And I think someone looked and they're like, you're not eating because you don't want to get anything on your shirt or tie. And I laughed. I said, and someone across the table, a former chair of the organization, said, oh, CPAs? Oh, this is why we're doing away with ties. He's like, if you ever meet a CPA who doesn't have a stain on their tie, he's like, introduce me to him.
Yeah.
And so that kind of broke the ice a little bit. And but I think the question that really sealed the deal over lunch was someone asked me like, well, have you given any thought to where you might live? And not at all what I was thinking because I'm superstitious. And I just said, well, no, not really. But I was flipping through my iPad the other day, and 2012 iPads were so
right.
And I found that my wife had plugged in some places to realtor.com. And I said, so while I'm not, she is. And I think that gave everyone some confidence that, okay, this actually could be a thing.
Ready.
So I went home that night.
How did you shift to getting to know the accounting profession from what you'd been doing before? Because it's so different.
Yeah. So hats off to the board and the staff here. They knew that the transition was going to be steep. So I remember signing my employment agreement on Halloween night of 2012. And I started, I think, at the end of January 13. And so the great part about that was a lot of the activity at the time of the organization tended to hew around tax season. So the fact that the society operation was transitioning during tax season probably worked to my advantage. So there was a lot of training and development for Scott going on. Those 90 days before, I had briefings from all the senior leaders on what was happening. I engaged with the board leadership. And then when I got here, I spent the next 90 days doing more of that, getting to know the team, meeting with other state leaders, AICPA leaders. But by the time tax season was ended, the expectation was that I was going to be ready to hit the road and do a 4-hour CPE town hall with what at the time was 3,000 members in 13 locations.
Oh, gosh.
So I look back on that now thinking, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
I wasn't ready for that. I was literally doing what is the bane of my existence, reading the slides. But, it was, hey, there's the deep end of the pool.
Right.
Let's jump in and see if you can swim. And while there was no picture on the wall of anyone who had served for 6 months, I can remember thinking, I can get through this. And I'll never forget that first town hall. Someone came up to me and in the nicest way possible, she said, I don't envy you. You've got big shoes to fill. And that was, in recognition of who Clark was and, just how in high regard he still held the organization. And someone walked up behind her who was on the board at the time and said, well, we knew that. And he's got a size 13, so we think he'll be all right.
Well, and that's what's so important. Like those kinds of comments are so not helpful to a new person.
Yeah.
Like to have someone come in and actually say, yeah, he'll be good.
Yeah.
Like it's important.
Yeah. So it's been fun, but I remember 4 months in, we had board turnover happening, and we were going around the room and people were saying their goodbyes. And one board member, it got to him and he looked at me and he said, this used to be a real easy board to serve on before you got here. And I was sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, is this how they fire someone here? And he said, but you know what? It's been a lot more fun because you don't know anything and you embrace that. You ask questions. And I've tried to remember that, it was fun and I asked questions. So I still try to do that to this day. And, but it's been great. I tell people all the time, I have the best job in the world because I get to work with CPAs and they're the best people in the world. I love the fact that CPAs don't get too emotional when they make decisions. They look at the data. And, if you're in my role, you love that. There's times I might hope for a little more emotion.
Right.
But, that's really great because it helps me think about how we should present information to make informed decisions. But the other piece is they're just good people because, they care about their clients, they care about their companies, they care about the people they work with. They see things. Sometimes, they tend to keep those themselves. And, the great part about it for me is I'm not afraid to talk about things. I get to tell your story. And this is a profession that has a great story to tell. And at times it tends to, we're not braggadocious and we tend to hold that in. And I'm like, that's all right. That's why I'm here. I get to tell people how great you are. And not just that you're great, but give them the story of how you helped that business survive or how you helped the legislature craft legislation that's going to make our state one of the best places to start a business this year. Mm-hmm. So being able to tell that story, that's powerful, but it also lets me blend who they are and who I am.
Absolutely. So we're getting close to the end, and I like to end with some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So you pick a category, either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Health.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want.
Oh, willpower. I do love a good dessert.
Yeah.
And I really love a really good, bold red wine. So.
Nice. All right. Things or actions I do have that I want.
Consistency. The pandemic, the opportunities of the pandemic, it allowed me to create some consistency in my fitness routine. I've been able to shed 40 pounds. I work out with a trainer 3 days a week. I box 2 days a week. I didn't realize how much I liked hitting something.
I know. I did that too.
There's something there. So it's been fun. But that level of consistency and getting in a routine, I've demonstrated I can do it.
Yeah, that's funny. That's the second time it's come up today. I'm like, I think I need to get back to boxing.
Yeah. And I like to tell people, I hit the bag. I don't hit people.
Right, exactly. Well, my son and I had started it during a stressful time. And so we would do that and then restorative yoga. So we called it our yin and yang.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want.
I'm not someone who dwells. Mm-hmm. I move on. I like to describe myself as someone who views his cup as perpetually half full because there's more opportunity to pour into it, but I never view it as half empty. And I have really tried in my life to not surround myself with people who view their glass as half empty. And at times that's meant making some tough choices about family and friends. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, last one. Things or actions I do have that I don't want.
I overthink things.
Yeah. You don't dwell, but you overthink things.
I overthink things.
Yeah.
Versus Scott just asking me what she thinks. Don't sit there and wonder about it and then try to,
Yeah.
Or I'll read into situations and particularly in this environment, Zoom, you can't read body language.
Right.
So that's trickier. So those are things I've intentionally tried to remove. Occasionally I'll get I call them the nasty grams via email.
Yeah.
And my thing is I don't respond to them.
Right.
One, because you never know how the response can be. I pick up the phone and call, and 9 out of 10 times it's I didn't mean, you didn't need to. And 1 out of 10 times it's, I can't believe you called, but yeah, let me unload on you.
Right.
And that's okay. But I try not to, I'm trying to get better at that, but I still overthink things.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So as we're closing this out, you've had so many interesting lessons in your story, but is there anything you want to make sure people walk away from this conversation with before we end our podcast today?
Yeah, I think that all of our experiences really inform the trajectory we choose for ourselves and the opportunities we're able to seize, but also the opportunities we're able to create. And I think back to just the earliest ones of hard work that I saw from those that I'm closest to and the opportunities I was presented and how they really shaped my desire to really be in roles where relationships matters and trust is what counts. And so in this profession, because I know there's so many who are in this profession that tune in, I just want to help people understand those are the skills and competencies you bring every day. And that's what makes you so wonderful and so useful and so valuable. Lean into it, run with it, and quite frankly, enjoy it because it's what makes you who you are and it's where the greatest value lies.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being a guest with me on this and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me, Amy. It's great to be with you.
And now for my mindful moments with my interview with Scott Wiley. And it really began with a very touching story about his upbringing and his family and his respect for his mother and his sister and how they all stuck together through tumultuous times of growing up. And how important that became in shaping who Scott is, not only in having his mother and sister as such big supporters, but also honest when they needed to be with Scott, but also how it actually gave him the confidence to be a leader so early in his life, whether that was in high school or college as part of his college fraternity, or when he eventually graduated and became part of the college fraternity organization and very early on at the age of 24 became CEO. And the thing that he talks about that kept him grounded was his sister. And his sister was 5 years older and made sure to keep him on track or that he was still comfortable in who he was and making sure that he was authentic, whether that be who he was personally, but also who he was on the outside. And it became a very important thing for him to have the support, and also his mom talking about his wardrobe and what he should wear and what he shouldn't wear as, this new CEO, but also having her work ethic to fall back on in understanding how to really drive that into his career as an adult. And so those examples really gave him the mentorship that he was looking for or needed to feel supported and also feel like he had somewhere that he could be comfortable to talk about maybe his fears or concerns of becoming a CEO so early and being able to show his vulnerabilities. And I think that is a really important thing, is to find those people in your life that you can say how you're really feeling and get the kick in the butt when you need it, but also be able to hear the things that you need to help you that next step of the way. And he also, because of so young being a part of student government and his college fraternity leadership, he really had a big interest in politics. And he's been able to weave that into these service organizations that he's been a part of to be able to do the advocacy and understand the agendas that are so important for the constituents that he does serve or the members that he serves and the associations that he is. So even though he didn't become a politician, this is a great example of how we still use those dreams that we had, or innate things that excite us, and take them into other job roles that we might not on the outside see as that occupation, but we actually get to do it together. He talked about how the jobs that he had younger really taught him to be able to create relationships, and relationships being such an important piece of being successful at the things that he has done. And he talked about his first job being a server, and how you learn to engage people at the table and read the nonverbal communication in order to deliver the best experience. And really, these kinds of teachings helped him to not only do that himself, but teach his members of his association, and especially CPAs, the importance of these relationships, and how when we have stronger relationships with our clients and with our team, that we actually build longer term relationships with our clients than if they're just assumptions in what we do, and we don't have enough time to be able to work with them the way that we want to. Is how we set those boundaries to do it. And so he talked about how he ended up going through the selection process of the Ohio Society, and really it being something that he hadn't been a part of before in the accounting profession, and how important it was to be asking the questions that he needed to ask. And so not feeling like asking questions makes you look weak, but actually looking at how asking questions helps you be smarter, helps you make the better decisions as a leader. And even when we are in new roles and feeling vulnerable in that role, or fearful that we might not do a good job, he really used this mantra of, I can get past 6 months, which was that one CEO in the fraternity that only lasted 6 months, where he's like, if I can get past 6 months, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to, really get my feet grounded into this role and take it on. And so I think that time element a lot of times is good for us, or some quantification to give us grace during a learning period of any job that we're in, to know that it's going to take that long for us to feel better, to feel like we understand what the role is, and we still might not at that time, but also being transparent with the people around us of, I take a 6-month learning process in order to be able to do my role well, and not being afraid to talk about the things that you might be having struggles with, or learning about what each of your members or customers, what makes them tick, so that you can better understand their stories and be able to solve for their pain points as well, is really important. So, overall, I really came away from this is relationships. And the more we can ask questions, the more it can serve us as a leader, but also giving back the value that someone is looking for us to create. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast, and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.